G'day, how we going? Now I know I'm late to the party on this one. I would have rather had this video done about a week and a half ago, but better late than never. So before discussing Bloodlines 2, I want to quickly cover off on a few things, as this sequel comes with a lot of baggage. Originally, this game was being developed by Hardsuit Labs and seemed to be promising an expansion of all the things people loved about the first game. Following a series of development issues, Paradox, the publisher, cancelled the game and were later approached by the Chinese room, who had their own pitch. I went into the game accepting that we weren't getting an open-ended RPG that was promised by Hardsuit Labs. That's simply not what the developers of the Chinese room specialize in, and it's not what they pitched to Paradox to get this project released. I do understand the disappointment fans have, though, to wait so many years and have that original promised game now only be an unfinished collection of ones and zeros on a hard drive that might never see the light of day. I get it. As for my own history with the World of Darkness setting, I don't really have one. My only involvement is the Battle Royale that I'd rather forget about, and a single playthrough of the first Bloodlines that I did in 2022. I was coming into the sequel ready to accept the game on its own terms and judge its goals and how well it does or doesn't achieve them, rather than imprinting expectations based on a different game from 20 years ago. Not that it's unreasonable to want a game titled Bloodlines 2 to expand upon the systems established 20 years ago. I personally think Paradox required the devs to still use the name for legal reasons, which has kind of stuffed the Chinese room around with marketing and expectations. I would encourage people to look past the title, much like the case with Arcane having the title of Prey thrust upon them. Supposedly the Chinese room asked about a name change at some stage, and that was denied by Paradox. Sorry for rambling, I just wanted to share my perspective so you know where I'm coming from when I discuss Bloodlines 2, and that I understand the disappointment fans of the series will have. So, after saying all that, does this game actually stand on its own merits and offer a fun experience? Unfortunately, no. I'll start with the best aspect of this game, which is its combat. For the first 6 hours roughly, I found combat to actually be okay. Heavy attacks felt great to land with good sound effects, the movement was responsive, it was enjoyable to slide attack into enemies or drop kick them off rooftops, and although it took some time getting used to having to dash into enemies to parry them, I was having fun. I've seen the sentiment that the core gameplay and the use of abilities starts to feel a little bit like Dishonored, and I can kinda see where people are coming from with that. What it lacks though is that more detailed sense of physicality. In Dishonored, there's a physical presence of enemies and weapons that this game just doesn't have. So in that game, you're able to duck under sword swings, or your slide is an attack in of itself, rather than Bloodlines 2's slide simply being that, and requiring an attack input to actually hit the enemy. I thought the game would actually have that sense of physicality, given the dropkick is carried out by being crouched and then jumping from there before you press attack. This had me thinking that I'd be able to duck under some swings and deliver a devastating counter. It's just not how the combat here functions though. Enemy attacks will connect unless you dash away fully. After dashing and hitting an attack, you'll do one of 3 attacks. Dash to the side and you'll do a roundhouse kick that can hit multiple enemies. Dashing backwards allows you to boot an enemy away and create more space, and dashing forward will have you knee the enemy and slightly stun them to be open for a few more attacks. The makings of an involved combat system are certainly here, and with more work done it probably could have been on par with Dishonored or even Dark Messiah if there were more environmental ways to fight these enemies. After those first 6 hours, where it started falling short for me were arenas where too many enemies were present. Being hit can stun lock you somewhat and interrupt your attacks, so it becomes quite common to spam dodge and try to roundhouse kick an enemy, or even boot some of them away to try to create space, and the attack just won't go off because you're getting interrupted by all these other foes hitting you. Then you start getting into fights where multiple people are walking around with guns, and on the highest difficulty, with no supplies left over, if that's the situation you're in, it can be a little frustrating. Having no blood for your powers when you've got one of the big boys left who carries a shotgun that's pretty much guaranteed to hit you every time you try to run up and punch them is quite the annoyance. Fights that occur later in the game where more people are carrying guns really highlights the issue not having ranged weaponry in this game brings. Initially, I was on board with the combat system being only melee, powers, and there is gunplay, but it's through telekinesis. The endgame fights are where I changed my mind on this because of how the usage of weapons is designed. Never mind the fact you sometimes can't even see the weapons you're trying to pick up. If you do manage to grab a gun, it will fire until empty instead of allowing you to manually fire each shot. Some of the more powerful weapons only get 1 or 2 shots as well. At some points, you'll have pistols slowly chipping away at you while shotguns knock you off your feet and a sniper lines you up. It all just makes you wish you could just pick up a weapon and use it properly. There's always your powers though, right? I found some problems here, and some of it kind of ties into progression. Firstly, you can only equip one ability per row. There's no mixing and matching to try to create like a all-out offensive build or anything of the like, and I'm kind of not a fan of that. It definitely would have been more freeing and made the combat a lot more fun if you maybe could have been like, you know what, I'm going to forego any stealth abilities that could help me out and just only equip all the combat-based stuff. And speaking of, during the stealth sections, they're pretty basic in terms of enemy placement and level design, but there was a bit of fun using the ability that would make a target scream from having his blood boiled, and then apply an ability that makes them explode when taking damage. That was really great for just clearing out a whole room. The couple of offensive abilities that I did have were satisfying, like these hard-hitting blood daggers, but the reason I didn't really have any unlocked is because unlocking them requires you to collect different currencies of blood and purchase the ability from one of the many clan leaders, as well as the fact that you need a large amount of XP points. So here's how the blood currencies work. Red, blue, and purple indicate the different modes, for lack of a better word, that a person will enter. Drinking this currency out of them only occurs when they have been activated into this mode. What does that look like? Well, if you see a prompt when walking around, you walk over to the person, press the interact button to talk to them, and sorted. They have been activated. Red means the person will try to fight you, so you take them to an alleyway to suck them off. Blue means they're scared of you, so you just comically follow them and wait for them to enter an alleyway. Purple means they're horny, so you go to an alleyway and just wait for them to enter after you. You can enter Vampire Vision to manually find these people based on the color of their aura, at which point you just need to do the corresponding dialogue choice to get them activated into their mode, and do that over and over again if you feel like unlocking all the abilities. It is fucking boring, tedious, and I just refuse to do it after the first few times. Like I said about the XP requirements as well, it makes side quests basically necessary if you want to unlock even just a large chunk of them, but I wouldn't recommend doing the side quests because they are some of the worst I have ever seen. I am talking MMORPG level stuff. One character will give you a package to deliver. You deliver it, and nothing happens. There is no semblance of narrative to even go with it. Until you complete all the side objectives at least, and then you find out some kind of important narrative stuff. I would just recommend looking that up. I don't think it's worth actually trying to complete the side objectives if you plan on playing this game. Another task will have you killing a mortal for some reason. There's usually something they've supposedly done. You can either follow them until they enter an alleyway or just one-shot them and kill them in the open. Even though there's a masquerade system where you're not supposed to be seen, it doesn't really mean anything. You have to try and just sit in the open before it actually fills and a vampire comes to stake you. It's really easy to just go straight to the rooftop and wait for it to die down. Another quest giver asked me to collect some collectibles for her. It's the most banal shit imaginable. Okay, the side quests are shit. Let's have a look at the mission design for the main story. I won't get into the narrative itself yet, just the design of the missions. You go to a location, demand answers for your predicament, get given a task to do before that person will help, sometimes receive no useful information, go to sleep, which acts as a transition to the playable Fabian sections, and as Fabian, you talk to people, do errands that require you to walk around town, and sometimes be given really tiny pieces of story. Fabian has his own Malkavian powers to assist with interrogations and such, but there is no ability to fail, and his powers require blood. So in at least a couple of instances, you're required to spend your blood on these conversations and go out somewhere to get more blood, come back, and then use your powers on someone else to continue on. What could have been a tight 8-hour campaign is instead just stretched across a near 20-hour one because it is jam-packed with these bullshit errands and the story is delivered at a snail's pace. And that's a shame because a couple of short set pieces that are in the game I actually quite liked. Nothing quite on the level of the hotel from the first game, but the devs clearly put effort and care into them. There are puzzles, or at least what the devs call puzzles. One of them involves quickly flicking 3 switches on using your telekinesis to open a door. When you come to this location later on as Fabian, I thought he'd actually have to solve something to get it open. But nope, there's just a potion sitting there that just gives him telekinesis temporarily, even though it's meant to be a nomad-only thing, basically. Another puzzle involves entering 4 different rooms with vampire vision on and lining up a symbol. And that's it, I'm pretty sure, in terms of puzzles. I don't actually recall any other moments that you could very loosely call a puzzle. Traveling to and from locations during Fabian's sections is pretty bad because he only has access to the ground level and a fast forward button. With the playable character Fire, you can at least climb onto rooftops and vampires sprint and glide without being seen. On that note, I might as well talk about the world itself for a quick second. I believe the map was inherited from the work Hardsuit Labs managed to complete, and it's basically been repurposed around this different game. The whole playthrough had me wishing this was just fully linear instead. The open world serves no gameplay purpose and is nothing more than an obstacle. At some point near the start, enemies will populate rooftops, and later there will be more enemies of different factions that have open gunfights, so the masquerade thing is not applying during those moments, but whatever. At no point, though, are you required to do anything about all these people on the rooftops. If you clear them out and kill everyone, you only get small amounts of XP. There's nothing actually going on in the rest of the city to make it feel lived in, though it does look pretty at times. The way lights shine through the snowstorm is definitely a vibe I can get behind, and it's probably the best thing going for the game in terms of visuals. Character models look fine, and the lip syncing matches the dialogue well enough, but there's next to no movement of their torsos creating these stiff-looking conversations. Not much emotion is shown in the faces of the characters either, which kinda ruins the moments of good voice acting.
I assume from the smell that you are not another of my unwanted suitors.
I am not with them.
No. Somehow you don't seem the type.
Sheriff, Bruja, my boss. Careful.
Can a law-abiding kindred not walk where they will in this city? Tell me, what is my crime?
Motherfucker. You really ain't no thin blood, are you?
Thin blood. Of weak heritage. A latter generation. They are common here?
It's not all great, as some characters either annoyed me or made me regret having functional hearing.
What the fuck does that even mean? They all taste the same to me, like chicken nuggets on legs.
In terms of frame rates and such, it's Unreal Engine 5, so you know what to expect. Going from native 4K to DLSS performance had no actual impact on my frames. When standing in the middle of the street here, both settings would have my frames sitting at about 80 to 90. Turning on frame gen did allow me to hit my refresh rate of 120, but regardless of your settings, there's a lot of traversal stutter that occurs. Even when you go through a loading screen to enter a closed off area, you know, where performance should be at its most rock solid, the game will still have noticeable frame drops. Readability of the world becomes a bit of an issue, as I said earlier regarding trying to pick up weapons off the ground. And annoyingly, your exploration is tied to a reticle on the screen that increases in size the closer you get to looking at a secret, a collectible, or a story-related item. There's no way to turn this off to try and immerse yourself into the world. You have to be led by this rather obnoxious UI element. And if you're thinking about going into the settings to try to turn it off, here is the incredibly extensive UI and HUD options menu that you've got to work with. I didn't run into too many glitches and I didn't have a single crash, so that's a positive. In one instance, I clipped through a building, but I was able to get back out of it, and there were 2 moments roughly in the same location where I fell through the floor and had to reload the checkpoint. The game doesn't have manual saves, which I think is a strange choice, but luckily my checkpoints happened to be right where I fell, so not much progress was lost, maybe like a minute. In a couple of fights, I had some weird moments where I could kind of juggle an enemy in the air. One of them was the boss, but I'm not actually sure if it's intentional or not. Before I get into my thoughts on the story, I'll quickly say that whilst I didn't really pay much attention to the music, what I did here was quite enjoyable. So the premise of the plot is that you're an elder vampire who has awoken from slumber and is trying to solve the mystery of who branded them. A Malkavian named Fabian is in your head upon waking up, and he has his own mystery slowly revealing itself through flashback scenes of a series of murders where ally vampires are being killed off. With the main character Fire, I greatly disliked how little agency they had in the story. You're led from location to location like a dog and just have to sit there and watch your character refuse to actually challenge anyone. And on the off chance you do get to challenge someone, it doesn't lead to a different outcome. It's really frustrating. You're constantly told if a person appreciates your dialogue choice or is angered by it or whatever, and none of that actually seems to amount to anything. Individual events cannot be changed or carried out in a different way. Instead, there are a few choices that you make that lock you into particular ending slides, and in the case of mine at least, there wasn't really much to it that could salvage my issues with the plot enough to care about it. Even when you solve the mystery of who the murderer is, you're not given any way to deal with them. You can actually bring it up in conversation, and all they do in response is demand that you go take care of another task. At no point can you just say no to that or rally others to fight them in any capacity. Slight spoiler, but with Fabian's murder mystery, they treat the possibility of another vampire being responsible as some sort of revelation, as if it was perfectly reasonable to assume a regular human was slamming rebar straight into concrete and ripping off heads with their bare hands. The big overall plan that's set in place and revealed at the end of the game was a bit of a head scratcher. Without getting into it fully, the main bad person is trying to save someone and also wants revenge for what's happened to them, but at no point in time does their plan involve physically going to that person to do anything. Instead, it's all about this proxy thing with Fire, and it made me scratch my head a little as to why they didn't do more for this person, or why there isn't a path that allows me to properly help them and confront the one they're hoping to take their revenge out on. I can't get into it more without severe spoilers, but there was one particular character who acts a certain way, very loving towards Fire, and it's very out of left field. It almost feels like an entire cutscene was removed that's supposed to kind of give you the context for this attitude, and I was trying to romance this character anyway, but was still caught off guard, so I can only imagine the confusion people are going to have who aren't romancing them. When the narrative as a whole feels so linear, even though there's choices, there's very clearly one path that the Chinese room want you to take, it makes me further question why we weren't just given a more straightforward action game with a different title. I also found the dialogue to be a little overbearing at times, with quips and meme references that don't at all account for the fact Fire should be having a hard time following these conversations. With the painfully slow pace that the story beats are delivered at, the hiding of some seemingly important bits of lore behind the god-awful side quests, the lack of quality in the writing at times, and the fact that your choices only amount to a couple of different ending slides, it all makes the narrative feel unfinished and very unsatisfying. At the end of the day, I think fans of the World of Darkness will probably find some enjoyment here, and I imagine some of the issues I have with the story are probably just due to not knowing much about the lore or how things work. And then you've got people who are just fans of vampires in general, and maybe they haven't played a vampire game in a long while, so they'd probably get a kick out of this one. I don't think enough stands out for me to recommend it to anyone else though, as it just does not do anything that compels me to want to pick it up again or even think about it beyond this video. There's potential here. Unfortunately, it's unlikely we'll see it fully realized. Until the next video, have a good one.